area. So welcome, and she's going to be running everything for us. With that, I'll call this meeting to order. So at this time, I'm going to move on to agenda B on the, or item B on the agenda. Mary, would you please call roll for me?
Rob Trout.
Here.
Norman Anderson.
Here.
George Crawford.
Here.
Alan Kripe.
Here.
Gerald Harris.
Here.
Brian Mallon.
Here.
Dan Lancaster. Stuart Nestor.
Here.
Bill Quisenberry.
Here.
Mark Thompson. Richard West.
Here.
Naomi Doyle.
Here.
Thank you. Looks like we have a quorum. This time I'm going to move on to item C on the agenda, approval of the minutes. In looking at the minutes, I do see that there is one editorial change that we found other than what was sent out to the board members, and that would be in the fifth paragraph of the minutes. We have Brian Bell, Program Specialist, provided the Education Examination Division staff report. That was under our staff reports from the last meeting. So that correction, I have that documented. Does anybody else have any corrections to be made? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to accept the minutes from the last meeting.
For the record, Gerald Harris, so move.
Brian Malin, I second.
Okay, discussions? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor to accept the minutes as amended, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. We'll go ahead and move on to next item, D, on the agenda, which is public comment. Is there anyone that wishes to make a public comment? None? We'll go ahead and move on to the next item, staff reports. So at this time, I would ask Ms. Tarsha Red come up for Licensing Division staff report.
Good afternoon. Tarsha Red, Manager in Licensing Division. The statistics for licensing, pretty straightforward. We currently have 25 authorized inspection agencies, 246 registered inspectors, 53,016 registered boilers, and have issued for this fiscal year, which means from September 1 of 2017 through June 30th of 2018, 19,976 certificates. So pretty steady. As you can see from fiscal year 2018, well, from 15 to 18, the numbers have remained about the same. FY17, there was a drop in the number of registered inspectors, but that's again, like all the numbers, it's just a snapshot, because the actual number of inspectors still remains around 230 or so. It's just there were a number of inspectors that renewed their license, and then maybe they left an agency and went to another one. And when we took the snapshot, the numbers were lower than normal. Other than that, we're pretty much staying about the same. Any questions?
Thank you, Tarsha.
All right, thank you.
Next, we'll move to item E2, customer service. Mr. Trey Seals.
Good afternoon, board members and presiding officer. Thank you for being here today. Thank you for your service. I am here to do a brief introduction for the Customer Service Division. We're doing this with all of the advisory boards since we, beginning of the calendar year, began presenting the report for the Customer Service Division to each board. Now, you've already met Irma Mendoza in the last meeting. She is the manager for this particular industry and will be presenting in future meetings on behalf of customer service. Just to give you a quick high-level background, Customer service, we're located at our downtown location, EOT, the E.O. Thompson Building. We have 52 hardworking individuals who are there to answer our phone calls, our emails, if we have any walk-ins. We also respond to the social media posts on Facebook, Twitter, and now Google. We answer phone calls in multiple languages. And just a quick history. Let's see, I came on to the agency in 2005 and have been with the division ever since that time, and have watched the division grow from 9 customer service representatives at that time to now the size that you see now, in keeping up with the customers that we serve on behalf of the agency and the citizens and the licensees. So your industry, just to go over the data, is pretty equal between emails and phone calls. We do have seasonal dips around the holidays, of course, and then towards the summer, things pick up again as school lets out, and certain inspections and certain things that increase seasonally. But yeah, there's an even split between email and phone calls, and we are there mainly as guides, and we answer questions about invoices, how to find an inspector. Any technical questions we get over to either Rob Trout himself or someone on his team, or our licensing division with Tarsha, and we work very closely with those divisions. And we really are there to just facilitate communication and getting information to the right person, or the person to the right person within the division. That concludes my report today and my introduction. I'm happy to entertain questions if you have any. Yes, sir.
Alan Kripe. Do you guys have, can you say what the largest percentage of inquiries, what the subject matter is when people are calling or emailing? What type of information are they looking for?
It's usually about invoices is the most of what we answer. We do every now and then get that one call that I know I need to immediately call Rob, but for the most part it's about fees and invoices.
Any other questions? Thank you, Mr. Sills.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. So we'll move on to item E3 now. Mr. John Metlock.
Good afternoon, board members. My name is John Medlock. I'm a prosecutor with the Enforcement Division. Pretty light presentation today, but I'll go over our statistics. These are through May of 2018, our fiscal year from September to May at this point. As you can see, we've opened 9 cases, resolved 8 of them. We've yet to reduce any of those into an agreed order, which means that we have not assessed any penalties or collected anything. Typically, because what we're finding is now that most of this stuff is we're getting able to resolve it informally, which means that either the case that was open, we've got them to either fix the boiler, which is kind of our main goal, is to make sure they're in compliance, or in a situation of an invoice, they've paid their back invoice, which is more important to us than anything. So, but as you can see, the statistics as a whole for the agency, we've opened 7,800 cases through May of this year. That's about on par with what we normally do. We do anywhere between 10 to 12,000 cases a year, and close and resolve, somewhere in that neighborhood as well. As you can see, we've assessed penalties of 2.4 million and collected 1 million. Part of that is because some things are on payment plans, some things are in a default order where we've sent out the notices, and just we haven't gotten a response, but we've reduced it down to a default order. So that's kind of what is always the discrepancy between those numbers. But if you guys have any other questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Questions? No? Thank you, Mr. Mellock.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Now we're going to move on to item E4, Mr. Jerry Gonzalez for Education Examination Division.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and board members. My name is Jerry Gonzalez, and I'm with the Education Examination Division. Before you, we've provided the latest boiler examination statistics through the end of the third quarter, which would be the end of May 2018. Along with that are still the numbers that we've included for 2016, fiscal year 2017 and 16 for you. To date, we've had 9 attempts on the exam, and again, that's through the end of May of this year. So if there's any questions I can try to answer for you, I'd be happy to.
Any questions? No? Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gonzalez. Appreciate it. Now we're going to move on to E5, Regulatory Program Management Division. Ms. Karen Berryman.
Good afternoon. For the record, my name is Karen Berryman. I'm with the Regulatory Program Management Division. First, I'd like to go over some organizational changes with you. Lee Parham has been selected as the Deputy Director of Regulatory Program Management. He also will continue to oversee the Business and Professionals program, so he will still be over the boiler program. We've got quite a few public outreach things to tell you about. Chief Inspector Rob Trout attended the ASME and National Board General Meeting the week of May 7th of this year, and that included technical training with all the chief boiler inspectors across the U.S. and Canada, and included discussions of modular hot water supply boilers and potable water heaters. He will also be attending the NBIC code meeting next week and the ASME code week the week of July 30th. Rob and Inspector Specialist Keith Sanford attended the Rolag Historical Boiler Steam College in Minnesota in June of this year, and that has to do with learning how to operate historical and locomotive boilers. Rob was asked by ASME to participate in their first ever Robotics for Inspection and Maintenance Forum as a panel member. That forum was held June 26th and 27th in Houston. And Rob has provided process and safety training for Ashcraft Company in June in Dallas, with a total of 74 people in attendance for that. And also for Hydrotemp earlier this week in Dallas and Fort Worth, with 38 attendees and 47 respectively. And then Rob will also be providing some training for the West Texas Boiler Safety Association in Lubbock in October of this year. Also, just yesterday, we had 2 new technical grams posted to the website and made available. One has to do with rental boilers, and one has to do with leased boilers. And they talk about the distinction between those two types of boilers and how they should be entered into Jurisdiction Online, our reporting system, and who's responsible for inspecting those boilers. With regard to our inspection statistics, the number of monthly boiler inspections has increased as we are now past the holiday season. The total number of overdue boilers is decreasing, as is the percentage of those overdues for which TDLR is responsible. Also, the boiler program assumed entry of Hartford steam boiler inspection reports as well as their insurance changes on September 1st of 2017. And we have achieved and maintained timely data entry of those submittals and continue to work with HSB to reconcile discrepancies between their database system and ours. You have in your packet also the inspection statistic, the specific numbers. I just want to highlight a couple of those for you. In the first block, with regard to ASME joint reviews and National Board joint reviews, we're averaging about 18 to 19 of each of those per month right now. That's actually over the time period here listed on the entire, from fiscal year 2016 through the present. In the next block, total extensions processed has averaged 166 per month. Total installation reports processed has averaged 181 per month. And the total temporary operating boiler permit applications processed has averaged 54 per month. In the third block, the total number of boilers inspected has averaged just under 2,500 per month over this time frame, with 653 average per month for TDLR and 1,820 for the AIAs. In the last block, as of the date that this report was run, we had just shy of 53,000 active boilers registered in the state. 25% of those, or 13,000, are assigned to TDLR, and the rest the AIAs have coverage of. The total overdue boilers was just over 1,500, and approximately 10% of those are TDLR's responsibility. What we believe right now with that 147 overdue boilers is that approximately 2/3 of those have just been switched over to TDLR from the AIAs and were already overdue at the time they came under the state purview. Secondly, we've had one inspector out for an extended leave, and we're having to have other inspectors cover his area for him. And lastly, I think as we talked about last meeting, we have just gotten fully staffed up with all of our inspection positions filled, but the last one has just finished up his training and gotten his commission, and just this week or last week has started going out on his own. So we think with that, we'll be able to start catching up more on our overdue numbers. And with that, if you have any questions, I'm available.
Anybody have any questions? No? Thank you, Ms. Barry. Appreciate it. We'll move on to item E6, a report from Executive Office. Mr. Nick Valentis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, board members. Nick Voinas, TDLR Chief of Staff, and again, thanks for being here. Thank you for your service. Here to kind of give you a little summary of what's been going on around the agency. We, as you heard the last time you were here, we were involved in our strategic planning exercise. Well, we've completed that now. And this is something that the legislature mandates all state agencies do every 2 years, and it's something that we take very seriously. We had, some of you are aware, we had external meetings, sessions in Arlington, El Paso, Houston, McAllen, and Austin. And these sessions were an opportunity for folks to come in and share ideas and opinions and tell us how we could do a better job. They were very successful. For those who were unable to make a session in person, we posted survey questions on our Facebook page and on our web page, and people were able to participate that way as well. We also talked to our staff. We had internal sessions throughout the agency, and the final report has been completed. It was submitted to the Office of the Governor and the Legislative Budget Board, and it's available for viewing on tdlr.texas.gov. Next up is our legislative appropriations request, which we're in the process of producing right now. Staff is busy identifying exceptional items and rider requests and providing information on revenue estimates and expenses. And once that's complete, our commission will take it up at their next meeting, which is next Friday, July 20th. And the deadline to submit it to the governor's office and the LBB is July 27th. Also wanted to talk to you again a little more about our outreach, and including your website and some traffic numbers associated with your site. Over the past 6 months, the period ending at the end of June, the boiler website had 25,656 page views. That's an average of about 142 a day. A majority of those folks access the site from a desktop computer, 68%, compared to another 28% that did so from a smartphone, and 4% from a tablet. Gives you an idea there of the folks tapping into the site. And also the top reasons for visiting the site, number one was the law, followed by rules, forms, exam information, and frequently asked questions. Also want to remind you that we have a presence on social media. Keep up with TDLR news and events on Facebook and Twitter. If you'd like. We also we have a group of about 4,000 subscribers who receive blast emails pertaining to your program, and if anyone is not receiving those and would like to, just go to the website and subscribe, and you will start receiving those. So thank you very much again. Thanks for being here, and I'll be glad to answer any questions you might have.
Any questions? Thank you, Mr. Venus. Appreciate
Thank you,
it. Hey, I'm going to kind of get out of order here a little bit. I'm going to move on to item H on the agenda. We'll come back to item F. Item H is a report from the Extensions Task Group that was created at our last meeting. They have met and have a report. Mr. Screwbar?
Good afternoon, Board, TDLR staff. I'm Andrew Schrewbar with the Lower Colorado River Authority. I was a member of the task group that was looking into making recommendations to Texas Boiler Law paragraph 6564 pertaining to the extension process between internal inspections. Our group consisted of 3 representatives from the industrial users, 3 representatives from the AIA, with the remaining committee coming from the TDLR staff. Basically, our goal was to simplify some of the ruling that we currently have in Section 6564, so not only that the TDLR can enforce the rules smoothly and without question, but most important, that the industrial users will understand and implement the requirements that are expected, to the rules. And the industrial users want to, follow the rules. They don't need any unexpected surprises. The worst thing could be an extension denial. It could be very costly. It could cost us not only lost revenue, but it's a responsibility on the person applying for the extensions, getting the certificates in place, and his job might be on the line if he cannot do that in an orderly fashion according to the rules. Basically, we have units out there that to do a normal shutdown, cool down, lockout, tagout, get the inspections performed safely, get the unit ready for startup, get it back into service, into the system. We're talking 3 to 4 days, if not more. It's a very competitive market out there, whether we're selling electricity or whether it's petrochemicals. So with that said, one of the topics that we had was the continuous water treatment monitoring. And our concern was for units that are not in service, but need to be ready for on standby, ready to come into the system at a moment's notice. Or we have forced outages where we need to make the repairs, get them back into service, into the system to meet the industry demands. So with that said, our task committee is recommending that we revise some of the paragraphs, 265, 64. We added some more paragraphs in terminology so that basically the rules could be interpreted easily, to be understood fully, to be implemented and enforced by the TDLR in an orderly fashion. So with that said, are there any questions or comments?
No? Thank you, Mr. Screwer. I appreciate it. So I'm going to go ahead and move back to item F now. I want to ask Ms. Laura Pfefferly to come up. This is the item where we had sent proposed rules out for public comment at the last meeting to address the public comments and hopefully have a motion to send to the commission.
Good afternoon, members, Chair. My name is Laura Pefferly, and I'm Assistant General Counsel with the General Counsel's Office. And I'm going to talk to you about 2 sets of rules today. The first one is the rules that you've already looked at and were approved to be published. They were published. The comment period closed. We received 1 comment. Those rules and that comment are in your materials. This rule was basically 3 technical changes. 1 to reflect the change in the ASME standard, and 2 instances of a wording error. The first change was to add bare tube in front of water heating surface in 65607. Also in 65607 to change the wording. It says a pressure relief valve shall be installed with a set pressure at or below the MAWP of the expansion tank. Alternatively, the boiler pressure relief valve may be used provided the expansion tank's MAWP is equal to or lower than the set pressure of the pressure relief valve. Well, lower is wrong. It's changed to greater there, and also in 65611 heating boilers. So those changes, as I said, they went for comment. We did get a comment suggesting that there were 3 other places to change the wording to add that bare tube in front of water heating surface. And the department agreed that 2 of those changes should be made. Those would be under unfired steam boilers and process steam generators, to add that bare tube terminology there. However, because that was not proposed in that rulemaking, we couldn't do it at adoption, which is what's before you now to approve this to be adopted. So those 2 changes are being wrapped into the next rulemaking I'm going to talk about, so it's being addressed. So today, what you'll be deciding and voting on is whether to go ahead and adopt these rules as they were proposed and as they were submitted for public comment without any changes, and the changes that were suggested and we agreed with will be made the next time. So there are no changes for adoption on these rules. So that would be your decision now, and vote would be to adopt these as they're written.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Pepperly. At this time, I'll entertain a motion for adoption or actually submittal of the proposed rules to the commission for adoption.
For the record, Gerald Harris, I so move.
For the record, Shannon Nestor, CNA, I second the motion.
Thank you. So now we're going to go into discussion, and before we move out of this, I kind of want to address the public comment that was made on this. So the public commenter that was made was asking if we should use the words bare tube in 65607B2, which is the area in the rules where we talk about if a boiler has more than 500 square feet of heating surface, that it should have 2 means of feed. This is not applicable, and the reason I say this is because this requirement actually comes from ASME Section 1, paragraph PG 61.1. And paragraph PG 61.1, it still says that if it's over 500 square feet of heating surface, that you have to have 2 means of feed. So for this reason, I do not recommend that we take his comment and move it forward when we get into that part of it. Now, the other 2 places that he recommended that we put this, put the bare tube in front of the heating surface is 65608C3 and 65609D3. Now, these sections of the rules is dealing with unfired steam boilers and process steam generators, and particularly when that process steam generator or that unfired boiler is fabricated in accordance with ASME Section 1. Since the rule was changed in Section 1 itself, I can see where it would be applicable to make this change here. The only part I am not sure of is, in most cases when we deal with process steam generators and unfired boilers, designers usually do not have an extended heating surface, which is basically what we're talking about here. However, for consistency's sake, I am recommending that we go ahead and look at adding that. Anybody have any questions or any comments about ASME Section 1 or what we're talking about here? I just want to make sure that we address the public comments at the right time before we get into the other part of it. Any questions? Hearing none, I'll go ahead and call for a vote. All those in favor to send the proposed rules to the commission for adoption signify by aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Not voting? Motion is unanimous. Motion passes. Thank you. So now we're going to go ahead and move on to item G on the agenda. Again, this one is going to be the proposed rules from the task group on extensions, as well as some changes that cleanup changes and the changes made from the public comment. Hopes for this one is we would get a recommendation from the board to send it out to public comment after it's finalized with the review process. Ms. Pfefferly?
Okay. As Rob said, this set of rules is a product of the work group and some other changes that we felt needed to be made, and also the 2 changes from the previous rule that were suggested that we couldn't make in that rule. Those are included. I can talk about the basically the non-substantive type minor wording and that sort of changes after we talk about the main objective in these rules, which is to embellish and expand the extensions section to make the criteria for getting extensions more clear and laid out. So I'm going to talk about that section and the 4 definitions that we propose to add that have to do with that section first, and then I'll cover the other changes briefly. And at any time, if you have a question or comment about this as we go through, this is the time to discuss it and make any changes. Any changes that are made in this meeting to the proposed rules will go forward, and they will go to public comment, and then after the public comment, we'll meet again, and then we'll talk about those, and then it can also be tweaked again after the comment, but we can't make as major of changes then as we can now. Before it's proposed, you know, the door's kind of open to making any adjustments we want to make now. At adoption, it's more limited. You can't make a lot of changes because the problem would be that the public has not had an opportunity to look at those changes and comment on them, and that's part of our rulemaking process. So you have the red line text or the proposed text in your materials. If you haven't had a chance to look at it, I'll kind of cover that as we go. The section, of course, for extensions is 6564, and that is on, well, it looks like the 6th page of those red line rules is where 6564 starts. And the definitions, of course, are in the definitions section right at the beginning, the definitions that we're adding. I'll start by refreshing you on what the statute requires for extensions. And we may not be able to get through this at warp speed like Rob likes to do, but I promise I won't speak Klingon, and we'll get through this. So, the statute says the interval between internal inspections of a boiler may be extended only if continuous water treatment under competent and experienced supervision to control and limit corrosion and deposits has been in effect since its last internal inspection. The last internal and current external inspection of the boiler indicates that the interval may safely be extended, and accurate and complete records are available that show that since the last internal inspection, samples of boiler water have been taken or monitored at regular intervals not exceeding 24 hours of operation, and that the water condition in the boiler is satisfactorily controlled. The dates that the boiler was out of service since the last internal inspection, and the reasons that the boiler was taken out of service, and the nature of the repairs made to the boiler and the reasons that those repairs were made. Those are the main statutory criteria for getting an extension. Those are not debatable. We have to abide by those. So you have to have the continuous water treatment. It's not prohibiting you from having a shutdown for a repair, but it's saying if you're operating, you need to be sampling. Exactly what I've laid out to you, those are the things that you have to abide by the statute, regardless of what the rules say. So those are our minimums. So in the extension rule, the main change here that reflects what the work group did is Part B. And I'll just kind of read that off to you to get you oriented here. This says the interval between internal inspections may be extended if, at all times since the last internal inspection, continuous water treatment has been maintained and 1, the boiler was in operation, 2, the boiler was in standby, 3, the boiler was out of service for a period not exceeding 10 days, or 4, the boiler was out of service for a period exceeding 10 days, and the owner or operator Head A, notified the department and the authorized inspection agency in a manner prescribed by the department and in accordance with paragraph 5, that the period of time out of service was expected to exceed 10 days, and requested from the department and obtained written confirmation from the department that eligibility for extension of the interval between external inspections would be maintained despite the period of time that the boiler was out of service. And then the fifth criteria here is that the notification required in B4A, which is notifying the department that you're going to be, you expect to be down more than 10 days. The notification may be made by the authorized inspection agency and shall be made on the earlier of the date on which the owner or operator becomes aware that the period of time out of service will exceed 10 days, or the date on which the boiler has been out of service 10 days. So that basically means that as soon as you know you're going to be down 10 days, you need to notify, or if 10 days arrives and you still haven't notified, you need to notify at that point. And then this is setting this up to where you let us know, we confirm we've gotten your notification, and then you know, unless there are other factors, you're going to help to preserve your ability to get that extension. So the definitions we propose to add first are, because there is no definition in the chapter yet or in the statute, continuous water treatment, and we propose to add that is a verifiable program that controls and limits corrosion and deposits in a boiler. And this basically reflects what the statute requires, which is continuous water treatment that accomplishes those things. The next definitions we propose to add are operation, which is a boiler is in operation when the energy source is being applied to the boiler. And that would be the sole criteria to say that a boiler is in operation. Out of service is the other definition to add, which is a boiler is out of service when it is not in operation and its water level is at less than normal operating level. Then the last definition to add is standby, and that says a boiler is in standby condition when it is not in operation and its water is at the normal operating level. Now, we're writing these definitions because it's going to help with the implementation of the extensions criteria that we're giving. If you feel like those definitions won't work for any other reason, or they conflict with some other matter in boiler operations, then we need to, to look at that. We did get a draft out to the task group who, met and developed these extension rules, and we did get some comments back. So I'm going to let you know what those comments were and how we suggest that the rule text could be further modified based on those. They're not major modifications, but they're not ones that the work group itself as a whole was able to discuss, because they came back as comments after a draft was sent out to the group. The changes based on those work group comments, which were basically that the days that it's out of service, where we're saying you need to notify if it's going to be 10 days out of service, that it should actually say 10 consecutive days, basically. In that, wherever we say 10 days, that we should narrow that down to 10 consecutive days. And part of the issue there is, can I be down for 10 days here and 10 days there and 10 days there, or am I limited to a total of 10 days? It basically makes that more clear that you can have more than one period of downtime of 10 days. It's not a cumulative total And I think it just kind of eliminates any other confusion about those days that you can be down and still preserve your ability to get an extension. And the other comment was that the boiler may have water in it, and it may be at a normal operating level in standby, but what about if it's got solution in there, or something that you wouldn't say is the normal water that you operate a boiler with? And so let me tell you the suggestions that I have, and I've talked to Rob about these, and it'll be your decision whether you want to further modify the definitions and the rule with these. My recommendation was that in out of service, that we would say a boiler is out of service when it is not in operation and its water level is at less than normal operating level, or it is not in operation and the water quality is unsuitable for operation. That would be out of service. So the water level would be less than normal, or the water quality at whatever level is not suitable to be operated. And that would be reflecting the definition of operation, where, you know, boiler is in operation when the energy source is being applied. When it's out of service, it's not in operation. The energy source is not being applied. The water level is less than normal, or the water level at whatever level is unsuitable to operate it. And going hand in hand with that would be the change to standby, which would be a boiler is in standby condition when it is not in operation and its water quality is suitable for operation and is at the normal operating level. So at standby, you've got regular operating water in there, quality of water, and it's at the normal level. This would be what standby would mean, and in the extension rules, which I read off to you, one of the conditions that you can be in when you are asking for an extension is that you can be in standby. And you're either in operation and standby, out of service for a short period of time, or out of service for a period exceeding 10 days. Those are basically the main ways you can be in operation or not in operation and still qualify for your extension. So in addition to those few changes to the definitions, my recommendation regarding the consecutive days was just to add that to the list, the interval can be extended if the boiler was in operation, was in standby, or the boiler was out of service for periods not exceeding 10 consecutive days, or the boiler was out of service for any periods exceeding 10 consecutive days, and the owner or operator had notified, as we discussed. And this would mean adding that the department had been notified that the period of time out of service was expected to exceed 10 consecutive days. We'd add consecutive there. And farther down, under 5B, the notification has to be made on the earlier of the date that the owner or operator becomes aware that the time out of service will exceed 10 consecutive days. We'll just be adding consecutive there. Or the date on which the boiler has been out of service for 10 consecutive days. So I think adding the consecutive is reasonable. It's not a huge substantive change from what the work group discussed and agreed on, and we actually did get 2 comments suggesting adding consecutive from the work group. So those are the main changes that would be proposed for the changes to extensions. And keep in mind that this would be published in the Texas Register. It would go out for public comment, and then the public and all boiler-related people have the opportunity to comment on that. So if they brought up issues that were missing or had a conflict with, then we could address that in the comment process and make any further changes at adoption if that was necessary. We want to get it as right as we can right now. So that is the changes for extension. Now, I'll go briefly through the other changes to the rules that are in this proposal. Most of these are not very controversial, some rewording, a little restructuring just to make it more clear, not changing the actual meaning of it. There is one other change that you might call substantive. It's in your red line draft rule version on the 5th page under 6513 boiler installation. This is just changing that section to remove the requirement to submit a manufacturer's data report when you install a boiler. So it's actually just removing something that you're being required to do right now. So that's the gist of that change to that section. That's what I would call a substantive change, but it's actually removing an obligation. The rest, I can walk you through, are just really rewording if you have any comments or questions. The first one is in the definition of authorized inspector, just a wording change for clarity. In the definition of repair, the definition of repair in the rules does not match the definition in the statute. This is something we can't have in rule where it is different from what the statute says. So the change to the repair definition is only to reflect what the statutory language is. It's not trying to change what a repair means. The next changes are in, well, we talked about 6513. You don't need to submit the manufacturer's data report. In 6515, boiler certification requirements. This is simple rewording, nothing changing in the requirements. I won't read through all of those. You have the text, so to save some time, I won't read them. But in the next section, in 6564, extension of the interval between internal inspections, of course, we've covered Section B, which is the new criteria for getting your extension or preserving the ability to get one. In subsection A, we did make some changes there to sort of clarify and make this process better to understand. And so I'll just run through it briefly. It says to extend the interval between internal inspections as provided for in Texas Health and Safety Code 755.026, which is the extensions portion. The following procedure must be followed. Before the expiration date of the current certificate of operation, the owner or operator shall submit in a manner prescribed by the department a request for extension for each boiler, including the following: the desired length of an extension for a time period for no more than 1 year following the expiration date of the current certificate of operation, the date of the last internal inspection, and a statement certifying that records are available demonstrating compliance with Texas Health and Safety Code, Section 755.026, and this section. And all that means is compliance with the extension requirements in the statute and the rule. The department shall notify the owner or operator and the inspection agency having jurisdiction of the maximum extension period that may be approved. Before the expiration of the current certificate of operation, the inspection agencies shall review all records and make an external inspection, and the inspection agency shall submit the inspection report in accordance with the law. Upon completion of the requirements in paragraphs 1 through 3 that we just went through, and payment of all required fees, a new certificate of operation may be issued for the extended period of operation. I don't think any of this is really shockingly different, but it has been reordered. Violations noted during the external inspection may be cause for denial of the extension request. If the department denies an extension request, the boiler shall be internally inspected before the expiration of the certificate of operation, and boilers for which the certificate of operation has expired must pass internal and external inspections before a new certificate of operation may be issued. So this rule, I don't feel like it presents anything new that you weren't already subject to. And that, of course, is Part A. Part B, we've already gone through, which is the extensions and the notification about the more than 10 days down. C now is a request for extension of the interval between internal inspections may be denied for failure to comply with any applicable provision of the Texas Health and Safety Code, Chapter 755, or this chapter. Basically, if you're out of compliance, you may not get your extension. I don't think that's anything new. And then D is just some wording changes to the emergency extension requirements, but no substantive change there. The next change is in 6571 Texas boiler number, placement on boiler, just replaces portable or stationary non-standard, that phrase with non-standard, and gets rid of portable or stationary in that wording, just using non-standard. So that's just a terminology change to reflect other rule changes that were made, getting rid of the portable or stationary terminology. Next one is just a change in the title of the fee section. It says certificate/inspection fees. We're just getting rid of certificate/inspection and just calling it fees, because there are other fees in that section. The next change is adding in unfired steam boilers the term bare tube in there that we already talked about, and also in process steam generators, adding bare tube there. I believe that is all. In 65-612, repair and alterations, just a little cleanup there of the format of the terminology about the section of plugging the boiler tubes. No substantive change, just some rearrangement there to make it a little more clear. So at this point, you're considering all of these changes for going to proposal, being published in the Texas Register, going out for public comment, collecting public comment, coming back and meeting again to talk about that. So this is the time to discuss any of this, the changes that are in your documents, the changes I read off to you that you don't see yet, that I'm suggesting we might make. I can, reread those to you if you aren't clear on what's what here, but they were changes only in two of those definitions, and basically adding the term consecutive to the 10 days in the extension requirements. So if anyone has any comments or questions that we need to talk about, I'm open to that.
This is Gerald Harris. I have one question. Basically, what it amounts to is if we add verbiage in that talks about suitable water for operation, where do we define suitable water? Because that's going to be one that's thrown at us really quick in the rules.
Okay.
My recommendation is to not add in the suitable water condition. For those of us who are boiler operators, we know what suitable water condition is. If we have a solvent in, now I'll just use the example of a boil out on a boiler. When a boiler's first installed, they'll go in and fill it up with water that is not suitable water to operate the boiler at, but it's used to clean the water, so it's a cleaning solution at that time. Or if the boiler has been in operation, it has a lot of scale buildup and stuff in it. We're going to do an acid wash on it. You're not going to operate a boiler with acid in it. My personal opinion is the suitable water condition is not needed. I think it's pretty self-explanatory as to what a boiler operator is going to operate with the boiler in it to create the steam. That's my thoughts on it.
I tend to agree because basically, when you get three different boiler manufacturers together, they're all going to have a different, a slightly different interpretation of what suitable water quality is for a boiler to operate. And it's pretty much been accepted throughout the industry for years and years that when you buy a boiler, you get a set of instructions with that boiler that tells you what that water quality is supposed to be. And it may vary from one company to another. That's why this could, if we add this could actually open a lot of avenue for some people to have a lot of questions. And so the next thing is going to be, well, now you need to define what suitable water quality is. So that could be a quagmire.
I agree. That could be a very difficult thing to define.
Brian Malin, I believe it'd actually be redundant because in the rules and the law, it states it has to have continuous water treatment. We've defined what continuous water treatment is, so therefore it already has to meet that criteria.
Fair enough. Oh, what about the consecutive days?
I agree consecutive days will help the industry understand what's going on so they don't think they have, oh, if I'm out 3 days here and 3 days here and 3 days to here, I got to stay below this 10-day thing. It might create some artificial rule that's not really present.
Okay, so let me ask the board members if anybody has a motion.
This is Richard West. I had one comment. I was just waiting for a pause, if you don't mind.
Okay.
On the in-service part, it's very common, especially with large utility boilers, that they allow the water level to rise above the normal water level, maybe overnight, or if they have a typical boiler, turbine, generator, step-up transformer that is being used to take care of load changes. They might fire it up if the wind turbines are dying or something. Overnight, they'll let the level rise with treated water. It helps keep the oxygen out of the space. And then they'll bring it down as part of the light-off process. Some of them intentionally raise the level to void oxygen from the upper half of the steam drum. So I think that's an issue.
Okay.
And that's all part of maintaining that chemistry. And for utility boilers that might run up to almost 3,000 psi, chemistry is a total different subject than, say, a 450-pound steam boiler in a chemical plant.
Okay. So, for the definition of standby, would you recommend that it says a boiler is in standby condition when it is not in operation and its water level is at least at the normal operating level? Basically saying at least at normal?
It would need to be above the minimum, yes. It's very seldom that they go low because feed water regulating valves tend not to be positive shutoff valves, and they want to be able to get it online, so it's actually very common for the level to creep up. So at the normal level or...
Okay, well, we're saying in out of service that a boiler is out of service when it's not in operation and the water level is at less than normal operating level. So you're saying that sometimes in standby you're going up to less than normal operating level?
No, going high. Going
Right.
high.
Yeah, you said you might go high, but I think you just said you
yeah.
might be lower.
Low's a danger. High is not normally a danger unless you're firing the boiler. Low's a danger. Now, downstream equipment don't like water. That's why they're built to run on steam, but I'm just simply saying you're kind of boxing owner-operator end to maintain that level. And it's very common that they'll purge any air out. You know, when the pressure goes down and they vent it, it's good to get the air out to keep the chemistry good in the steam space. I'm getting a nod from an owner-operator.
Mr. West, would it satisfy your concerns if the definition of a standby was changed to a boiler is in standby condition when it is not in operation and its water level is at the normal operating level or higher?
Yeah, I believe so.
Yeah, I mean, that's basically what I was saying. It's at least at normal, but, okay, so at the normal operating level or higher. Do you want to say or higher or at least?
Does it matter to you, sir?
I think very simple, at least.
Okay, we'll go with at least.
Thank you.
Okay. Oh,
The other thing, I apologize, Richard West again. On the intent of the 10 days, that's it's not really on what's got the boiler out of service, because to come back to a typical power plant, the boiler might be just fine and ready to run and everything's great, but the step-up transformer went out of service. Is that where we're kind of going with part of this?
yes, sir. In fact, this actually happened not too long ago. I had a utility contact me and say, Rob, we're having to do work on our forced draft fan. Is that I can't run the boiler without the forced draft fan. I'm not entering the boiler. Am I still eligible? And that's kind of where this started. So we're not considering only just repairs to the boiler. We're considering any repairs that's going to cause the boiler to not be in operation.
That's good. Also, like in a chemical plant or petrochemical, some of the unfired boilers, they could be affected by something downstream. And back in my work days, that was a major problem when companies switched from one company to another one and they were interpreting that part of it a little bit different. Boiler can be fine and something downstream is having to be worked on.
Causing it to be offline. Yes, sir. I agree.
Great. Thank you.
I wanted to note that I think there's an error in the proposed text in the extension section. In B, 4B, it has the word external inspections instead of internal. I think that's meant to be internal there. So we can correct
Which one?
that. B4, big B, requested from the department and obtained written confirmation from the department that eligibility for extension of the interval between external, it should say internal there, I think.
Nope, it's external.
Well, we're talking about the interval between internal inspections, but it says external there. Shouldn't, I think that's supposed to say internal, because we aren't talking about interval between external.
You are right.
'Cause if we propose for this to go forward, we need to make that correction.
Yeah, that is correct.
Okay,
Okay.
so the change that we have is not to address the water quality issues in the definitions and leave the changes out about the water quality, but to add that In standby, it has to be at least the normal operating level. The water has to be at least the normal operating level, and to change external to internal in that one rule. So if there are any other questions or comments about these,
Or I would ask you read the proposed changes for the consecutive 10 days. That way we all have a good understanding.
Okay.
It appears to me that the board is saying no to the change to the suitable water quality, but yes to the consecutive 10 days. So if that's going to be the recommendation or the motion made, I would like for all of us to be able to hear exactly what the proposal will read.
okay. I'll just read all of B, which is the kernel of it. The interval between internal inspections may be extended if, at all times since the last internal inspection, continuous water treatment has been maintained and, 1, the boiler was in operation, 2, the boiler was in standby, 3, the boiler was out of service for periods not exceeding 10 consecutive days, or 4, the boiler was out of service for any periods exceeding 10 consecutive days, and the owner or operator had notified the department and the authorized inspection agency in a manner prescribed by the department and in accordance with paragraph 5, that the period of time out of service was expected to exceed 10 consecutive days, and requested from the department and obtained written confirmation from the department that eligibility for extension of the interval between internal inspections would be maintained despite the period of time that the boiler was out of service. Paragraph 5 says the notification required up above that we just talked about may be made by the authorized inspection agency and shall be made on the earlier of the date on which the owner or operator becomes aware that the period of time out of service will exceed 10 consecutive days, or the date on which the boiler has been out of service for 10 consecutive days. The wording here does not limit the 10 consecutive day periods to any number of periods. The change in the wording says, the boiler was out of service for any periods exceeding 10 consecutive days. So that means there can be more than one period like that. And it also says the boiler was out of service for periods not exceeding 10 consecutive days. Also doesn't limit that, the number of times it can be down for 10 consecutive days. There's no guarantee in here that if you're down for lots of periods of 10 consecutive days, that you're still going to get an extension, but this is laying out criteria for, that comply with the statute. You have to have the continuous water treatment. If you're in operation, you still have to do your sampling. But by defining these terms and giving these criteria, it gives a lot more certainty, I think, to when you know you're going to get an extension and when you probably not. And so that's what we're trying to get at is giving you those kind of guidelines for that.
Okay. Thank you. I believe we may be ready for a motion. Is anyone prepared to make a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I have a question. Going back to 6513 on the deletion of manufacturer's data reports to be submitted
Yes.
to the department, what the catalyst for that would be?
So, the department has been thinking about this for some time. We actually keep all the manufacturer's data reports in our imaging system, which actually is cost prohibitive to the department because we have to pay for the storage of it. And when in fact we've done a little bit of research and we can get that manufacturer's data report free of charge from the national board, so there is no need for us to archive it. So by removing it from the department or from the requirement, we still have access to it. We just don't have to keep it on hand.
So that report is not forwarded to the field inspector when he's doing the initial inspection?
That is not correct. So it's not forwarded from us, The manufacturer, in accordance with ASME, Section 8, Section 1, Section 4, manufacturers are required by those codes of constructions to submit the manufacturer's data report along with the vessel. Therefore, it should be on site with the vessel for the inspector's use if he decides he needs it.
Okay, thank you.
I just had one question, going back to the consecutive days. Did you say that you were going to change the language to any period? Because it's currently a period.
Right, yeah,
Okay.
what I read off to you with any, that's, I mean, we're adding the words consecutive in there where it goes, but, yeah, in 3 and 4, it's gonna say 4 periods not exceeding, and then in 4, it's gonna say for any periods exceeding. So, yeah, those 2 words, and then, in 5, big B, little 2, it'll say out of service for 10 consecutive days. Just a few other words in there besides the addition of consecutive. And of course, we're going to correct external to internal in 4, big B.
Any other questions? Okay, I'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion to accept the proposed changes to the rules at this point in time. Shannon Nestor, CNA.
Okay, so that would be to accept the proposed changes to the rules and submit them to the commission for adoption?
That's correct.
Or, I'm
No,
sorry,
no.
this one's to submit to
Submit
public
to
comment
public comment.
upon completion of the review process.
As we've discussed today.
Okay. Do we have a second?
Mr. Chairman, Bill Quisenberry, I second.
Okay, is there any further comments? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Not voting. Motion passes unanimously.
And remember, if you have any second thoughts or additional thoughts about this, you can comment it during the comment period as well. So, even though you can't, your board may not meet again, you can still get your input in the comment process. Just submit them like anyone else, and, that'll be considered, and then there'll be a formal response. So, you can have that input.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am. Appreciate
Thank
your
you.
assistance, Ms. Pfefferly. This brings me to item I on the agenda, recommendations for items to be on the next agenda. My recommendation will be for us to add the public comments discussion from the rules we just sent to public comment to address those. I have no others. Anybody else have any?
Rob, you wanted to add that one that was left off?
Yeah, we'll add the or the discussion from the task group for laying up boilers. Let's add that one to it. Anything else? So that brings us to item J on our agenda, discussion for date and time and location of next meeting. The location is going to be, as usual, right here, but I do have a recommendation for the board. Since we are still in the review process for these rules, I am unsure of the time that they will actually get out to public comment at this time. I would propose, once we have that definite date of when we get out for public comment for those rules, we schedule a time for us to come back and reconvene after closure of the public comment, and we have time to address them. So I would ask that the board accept us not setting a date and time right now, and then TDLR contact all the board members when we have a good date where we can confirm everything's completed and ready for us.
Good idea.
Is that acceptable?
Good idea.
Okay, thank you. So we'll go ahead and move forward with that. That brings me to item K on the agenda, which is adjournment. We are so adjourned.